Following the disappointment of the original game, Watch Dogs 2 sought to improve upon its predecessor. By most accounts, it certainly does. Watch Dogs 2 is the whimsical hacker playground that the original game should have been. Marcus is a likable protagonist surrounded by a colorful cast of hacker vigilantes seeking social justice through a somewhat convoluted story. The breathtakingly detailed world provides a cynical perspective on the San Francisco Bay Area, littered with cultural references and social commentary. While it relies on too many old systems to truly revolutionize the open world genre and push it forward, this game is flat out fun as hell and distinct enough to separate itself from the competition. Hey guys, JV here sharing my review of Watch Dogs 2. Before we jump in, I just need to share my experience with you guys, what platform I played it on, how long I played it, and all of the details like that, so you know what my bias is. So, I played the game on PlayStation 4 with a review code provided by Ubisoft. I do have to disclose that to you guys. My playthrough was around 16 hours. I got through the main story. I did a mix of side operations along with the campaign, so I think I got through about half of the side operations, a pretty good chunk of it, and I played a very small amount of multiplayer, but it was restricted because I don't have PlayStation Plus. Didn't make sense to me to go ahead and sign up for PlayStation Plus to, experience the multiplayer. I did watch some other videos, so I have an idea of what the multiplayer is like, but don't expect this to be an in-depth look at multiplayer. This is mostly, the bulk of the game, which is the story, which is not the online experience. So from a technical perspective, there was a solid frame rate on my end. The game ran really well. I didn't have any issues technically, honestly. Again, this is on PlayStation 4. The PC version of the game hasn't even come out yet as I'm recording this video, so I'm not sure about that. But there are zero technical issues in my experience with the game beyond the online connection, and there was a big issue with that. It's solved now, so multiplayer works just fine as I'm recording this video on PlayStation 4. Again, that's the only platform I played, so I can only, tell you for sure it works on PlayStation 4, but it certainly didn't at launch, and that is really awful, honestly. It's inexcusable that a multiplayer mode in 2016 doesn't work at launch. So just know that that doesn't reflect this review at all, because when I did play it, it was available, but still in the back of my mind, it's like, that's awful. Ubisoft needs to be better in the future. This review is going to be really freeform. I'm not doing a good, bad, and ugly. I just don't like that format very much. I did that with my last review. So I'm just going to go through different elements of the game, tell you what I liked and what I didn't like. And so we're going to start with gameplay. If I were to summarize this game in 2 words, it would be hacker's playground. I mean, the developers really went out of their way to make everything in this world fit within that cohesive idea of, this game's about hacking, the story's about hacking, the main character is a hacker, everything is about hacking, and you're given so many tools to pursue that. You have so many just research points and different things you can upgrade. You've got the quadcopter, the jumper, all of that stuff is really cool, and it all fits in with that idea. And so I think they did a great job with that throughout the city and throughout just the gameplay in general. This game is a hacker's playground. I think Ubisoft fully realized and fully fleshed out that idea. This is a hacker's playground, a hacker's universe, and that's all this game is about. Every element of the game contributes to that, and that's something I definitely appreciate. A great improvement over the last game is the free running. The free running, which definitely takes some cues from Assassin's Creed. I mean, it has to. It's Ubisoft, right? But it's so much better than the original game. The original game was a little bit clunky with the traversal and movement in general. Marcus is so much easier to control. It feels so much more freeform and open, and they did a really great job of, navigating the world with that. I will say there's a lot of platforming in the game. I didn't expect that, but there's a ton of platforming, and it was sometimes frustrating for me to get around buildings to objectives. There would be an objective point, and then it'd be really hard. I didn't know which part of the building I need to approach from, but there was really only one. I mean, the game does a good job of giving you multiple routes to complete missions and whatnot, but sometimes just to get to a mission marker to start a mission, it was on a building and it was really hard to get to. I just didn't know how to get there, and maybe that's just a world design issue. I think it is, but that did frustrate me a little bit. In terms of combat, I think the game does what it needs to do. There's nothing flashy about how you approach enemies. There's a melee button, you can stun people, so there is a lethal versus non-lethal, but that has zero consequence on the game. That's something I'm going to talk about when we, talk about story, but the combat does what it needs to. It didn't blow me away. It's not revolutionary again for the open world genre. There's nothing crazy going on. It's essentially just cover-based open world combat. Something that was very off-putting that I realized about halfway through the game is that Marcus is not a killer. His attitude is not that of a killer, and it's odd to me that there are so many weapons in the game that allow you to just kill and murder. The tone of this game is very whimsical, and so the fact that you can just go on a full-on assault, just like Grand Theft Auto, for example. Grand Theft Auto, those are some terrible characters. You can believe that they'll kill people. Marcus, not so much. And so I'm going to readdress this in the story portion of this review, but just know that that is an interesting disconnection. It's a disconnect. It causes me to think, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I don't know how they're going to solve that problem in the future, but if Ubisoft goes back and makes a Watch Dogs 3, I think maybe they need to think about either the tone of their game or maybe not having the main character kill anybody if it's going to be as whimsical as this game is. While the combat did do what it needed to do, I found it to be a bit monotonous after a while. Taking out hostiles, and either killing them or tasing them, it did get repetitive, and it fell into that trap of, it didn't really revolutionize much in terms of open world combat. It is standard, it is repetitive after a while, whether you attract them in a certain way, distract them, shock them, tase them, kill them, it's all the same. And so this game, just know that it doesn't really revolutionize on any of those fronts. While we're talking about combat, the 3D printed weapons is a very cool concept. It's not something I'd ever seen before in a game. This is a small little detail, but I really appreciated that. It's like, you know what, in 2016, we can 3D print weapons. Maybe not to the extent that you can in Watch Dogs 2. It's a little ridiculous, but at the same time, I thought it was a very cool concept. The overall gameplay loop in Watch Dogs 2, for the most part, is start this mission and then do some kind of hacking that involves stealing information or getting to some objective. Maybe Marcus needs to go in himself, maybe he doesn't, and you can just go in there with your quadcopter or jumper. But overall, that process in the gameplay loop is pretty fun. It wasn't too repetitive. It did get repetitive at some points, I'll talk about that in a second, but it made me want to explore more of the game because there was enough going on. There was enough variation and variety within the mission structures for me to want to go out and explore more of it and do, similar versions of the same thing. And so I think they kind of got away with it, and I think that's a lot in part of the hacking and the idea that that's a pretty novel idea. There's not a lot of hacking in video games. Watch Dogs kind of, owns that, in my opinion, at least from my experiences. And again, there's so many upgrades and gadgets to play around with that I really found myself, going crazy, trying to go for the research points so I could unlock different, functionalities with my quadcopter and jumper. I'm probably going to contradict myself, but I will say once I upgraded the quadcopter and jumper, which I did very early in the game because I really enjoyed the gameplay aspect of those two devices there was not much else in terms of depth. I would have liked to have seen more depth with the quadcopter and jumper, more functionality, more ways to use those two devices. Maybe that's just me and the way I played the game. In general, I think there should have been more opportunities for Ubisoft to explore hacking because they really kind of dilute it to this, ephemeral thing that you don't really see. It's like, oh, Marcus, walked up and hacked some guy's phone and stole $700 from him. You don't actually hack the phone. Obviously, if you needed to hack every single phone, that would be monotonous, but I think Ubisoft needs to work in some more variety with these hacking minigames because just the concept, again, of hacking is super interesting. It's super unique, and I think they have some untapped potential there. Driving was a big complaint with the original Watch Dogs, at least from what I can remember. It was just a little weird. It was a little off, and the camera angle was wrong, and you would run into stuff even though, you didn't feel like you were supposed to run into things. That's been solved with this game. It got some very solid driving. I believe Ubisoft hired some sort of talent from Burnout or some other franchise where they really did fine-tune the driving. It feels nice. It feels floaty. It feels easy. It's just solid. I mean, there's nothing remarkable about the driving, but you do need solid driving in an open-world game. They absolutely fixed that. But I will say that police AI in this game kind of sucks. They let me get away in a particular mission where I was like, you know what? I would have liked to have been chased a little bit longer. I know that sounds crazy, but you try to find a happy medium between I didn't get away fast enough versus I got away too fast. I think the AI is a little wonky. It's definitely not perfected. It's probably hard to do in an open world game, but certainly the police chases and being chased in general, the AI is not perfect. Speaking of AI, there's a lot of interesting aspects about the world in general from a gameplay perspective. There's a lot of random events that happen, and I remember watching a developer video before Watch Dogs 2 came out, I believe it was earlier this year, where they talk about random events that would make the world feel more realistic, like it's actually alive, and they absolutely nailed that. I mean, there are some crazy random events that aren't so crazy. They're believable and realistic, but people getting in fights, people yelling at other people on the phone. There's gang fights in certain territories. You'll see people randomly hijack other people. You'll see someone shoot someone else dead on the street. There's police interactions, and you can actually affect events. There was one particular event in which I did something to distract a gang member, and then that gang member went out onto the street and committed a crime, and then the police came, and then I caused a conflict between the gang members and the police. So this very interactive world. There's lots of domino effects that can happen, and I really appreciated that. It did make me feel more immersed in the game. Overall, the NPCs were very diverse and interesting. I did not have one single instance where I looked at a guy and said, I just saw that guy 10 minutes ago. That just didn't happen. So there were all kinds of people of different shapes and sizes. Again, in this game, you can just use your phone to get, random information about somebody that you're looking at on the street. I didn't see any, repeats, any repeat models, which I definitely saw in the original game. I didn't see any repeat descriptions or anything of that sort. And so everything was diverse, very interesting. There were also cool little interactions. Like when you came up to a dog, you could pet them. You could do different things to different people. You could light their phones on fire. And so interacting with the world as the protagonist, I thought was really well pulled off in this game. As with any Ubisoft game, there's plenty of just random hunting, just a bunch of random crap to do in the world, and that's definitely still here with Watch Dogs. There's less of it, which is nice, but you have to go around and hunt for research points, and that's just blatant item hunting to me, or, just something to do. It's like busy work. But I will say, I did it. I did a lot of it. I didn't force myself. I just wanted to go out and get some more research points so I could unlock some more stuff for my character. So I think they tied that in fairly well with the narrative. Again, it's all about hacking, and so that made sense. And there were some nice puzzles as well with the item hunting. It wasn't the same puzzle every single time. They were diverse enough to keep me interested, obviously, because I did almost all of them. And so I think that was a nice way to address item hunting, which usually in Ubisoft games, especially like going and getting feathers in Assassin's Creed, I mean, that was just so boring and monotonous. But in this game, I thought they did it fairly well. The customization of your player character in this game of Marcus is awesome. You can dress your character from head to toe, lots of different pieces from like 7 different stores with different styles, and you can just go all out. That was something that was sorely missing in the original game. They have absolutely added that and solved that in Watch Dogs 2. Just a few more notes before we move on. Fast travel is obviously an element in an open world game that a lot of people feel is necessary. It's not something that was in Mafia, and that's something that a lot of people complain about. But in this game, I think it is necessary. It's monotonous though, and I think fast travel in general is just a double-edged sword. So I don't know if I should really talk more about it, but you do fast travel and it makes sense. It's easier to fast travel, but it detracts from exploring the world, and so there's this constant conflict. I think that's just something you deal with in every open world game. Something you also deal with is a lot of objective following. It's just follow this marker, go to this marker, point to point. Things are fairly linear beyond infiltration. And some of my favorite moments in Operations was, here is a building, infiltrate it, get in there by some means. And with that, it's not so linear. There are very many options you can approach that, but there's a lot of objective following. And again, I think this is just an open world double-edged sword thing. This game does not revolutionize in that respect. Just a few small little side notes before we move on from gameplay into story. So there were a few things that I wish I could do in this game. Number one is I wish I could pause the game more easily. Oh my god, it's so annoying to have to go into your phone and then click game options when I just want to pause the game. I think that's something that every single game needs, and it just pissed me off at small little points, but that's just a small nitpick. I also wish I could manually save the game. I don't know about you guys, I'm 22 years old, and so sometimes the reason I say that is because games nowadays, you don't always have a manual save. But I always appreciate that because that's how I've always done it. And so in Watch Dogs 2, I would like travel to the hackerspace or do something silly like that just to make sure that the game's saved. And so that was a disconnect for me, and I was thinking, I just really wish, I could save the game myself. Moving on to story. Now, there is going to be spoilers here. I warned you guys at the beginning of the video. Some people don't like it, but this is just the format that I'm going with since the game's been out for 2 weeks now almost. And so overall, in general, I'm super happy with Marcus Holloway. I think he's a lot more of an interesting character than Aiden Pierce, who was just the worst. He was a wet noodle, and Marcus Holloway is so interesting, just I really like Marcus Holloway. He's so likable, and I think he's a great character. He's a nice character progression throughout the game, and so they did a wonderful job with the protagonist. I would love to see Marcus Holloway in Watch Dogs 2 if that's the direction Watch Dogs 3 if that's the direction that Ubisoft is going in. At the same time, the supporting cast of characters is a little annoying at first, but they're really unique. I really grew to love all of the characters at DedSec. Yeah, Sitara, Wrench, Josh, Horatio, and later in the game, Ray. I really enjoyed all of them, and I think they were unique, diverse, and really provided their own kind of spin and perspective and comical relief to the entire story. And again, the tone is very whimsical, and that's felt through most of the story. We'll talk about that in a second, but I really enjoyed all the characters. This game is chock full of references to popular culture. It's absolutely insane, and that's first felt in a very early mission. I don't know if it's a side mission or not. It may be a side op, but the guy in real life who jacked up the price, he's a pharmaceutical guy that jacked up the prices of HIV medication. There is a very similar mission in this game that's just like that. And then you have Scientology. There's a weird kind of religion with a washed up action movie star, just like Tom Cruise in Scientology in real life. There's so many references to pop culture, and that's like 2 out of like 200. I feel like there were so many references in this game. It's super relevant, and I think the tone and approach that the game took it with was it's very witty, very cynical, and I appreciated it. It was kind of like Grand Theft Auto, but with its own spin. And I think Ubisoft does a good job enough of separating that kind of social commentary from, obviously, its competition with Grand Theft Auto. I have some mixed feelings with the story overall. In some places, I really do like it and appreciate it, with the main operation and whatnot. But in others, I felt it was really convoluted. I didn't know what was going on. There were too many pieces being thrown in at once. I will say there was some nice closure at the very end. So, point to point, we know what happened, A to B, or, obviously there's a crazy route in between, but it was enjoyable, again, but very mixed. One big thing I had a problem with is that it doesn't feel like there's much consequence in the game. You could do good things and bad things, but it didn't feel like the world as a whole was affected by Marcus being this killer who went on mass murder sprees versus, I'm just going to tase everyone, knock everyone out, be in and out, and no one would notice. And so that was a disconnect for me, and it's something I touched on with the combat. Marcus does not seem like a guy who would kill 300 people over the course of however long this game takes place, like the course of a year. I can't really remember, but Marcus doesn't seem like that guy, but he totally can be. You can go and kill everyone, and so I think Ubisoft really needs to address that and think, if we're going to have a whimsical tone for this game, do we need to kill everyone, or should we just knock everyone out? Or is taking away that right from players going to be something that will incite backlash? Will people not buy the game because they can't kill people? So there is a multifaceted issue, but personally for me, it didn't make sense that Marcus ran around and killed everyone. I've written down a series of points throughout the story where I was like, I'm a little confused, this is convoluted, this kind of got off track, I don't understand what's going on. So for the first 4 hours of the main storyline, I didn't know who the bad guy was. Bloom, it was just like, we needed to attack Bloom. Bloom has no face. I'm not sure who it is yet. And then we have this mysterious man bun villain who comes in, who's silly, but still interesting. I actually thought he was an effective villain. I think his name was Nemec Dushan or something like that. He was a very interesting villain once you understood who he was. So maybe that's just something that the game did on purpose, where it's like, we're just rebels without a cause. We're just these hacker vigilantes. We really don't know what we're doing. We're just trying to build DedSec to take down Bloom. But then they came into the idea, in fact, that they needed to take down Dushan, this silly CTO of Bloom, who you understand after a while is really a big threat. The next disconnect that I had was with the Burning Man section, where DedSec was kind of down but not out, and Marcus was trying to rally the troops because there was a big setback in the story. And then that's when Ray comes in. He kind of changes the tone with this weird acid trip scene. I thought that was weird. I didn't really understand why that was in place, why they needed to go to Burning Man, why they need to have this down and not out thing. Maybe it was just the way that it was executed. I thought the Burning Man level overall was really not good. It was just walking around, talking to different people. You weren't doing much. You did do one hack, which was actually pretty cool, that brought you to, recruiting Ray into DedSec, but I thought it just wasn't very effective. Fortunately, the game gets right back on track with the Google parody, or Noodle with Horatio. I thought that was really great. But then we go back to Lenny, who was just this terribly revolting character. Just what the fuck? That is what I thought every time I saw Lenny talk or interact with Marcus. So Ubisoft does a good job of just making me feel like, what, you know, WTF, what the hell is going on here, especially with Far Cry and the villains in that game. They do a great job of that. And I feel like they tried to pull that off with Lenny, but once Lenny was introduced, that's when everything got really convoluted again on another level. The narrative with the Bloom CTO, you know, Dushan, Lenny, and then the FBI. I mean, it was just so many things coming on at once that made things really convoluted. I could go on and on with these different, you know, ups and downs, the roller coaster ride of this narrative and my mixed feelings. Just a few more notes. The death of Horatio was a really serious tone shift. It was kind of weird. I didn't know if I liked it or not. But then right after, like 5 minutes after, there's this strange whimsical attitude comes back in there of Marcus and everyone else. They're all pumped and excited when they just lost a deep, dear friend. And so the whimsical tone of the game really conflicted with the seriousness. But again, on another level, you had Wrench, which had this really awesome story arc who, you know, he got captured and exposed by the FBI. And he has this moment where he lets his guard down with Marcus and really lets him in on who he really is. And so that was a nice moment. But again, you go back to Horatio and Marcus goes on this killing rampage. I guess you don't have to kill everyone. I certainly did because I felt the emotion of the game. But you spend about 30 minutes to an hour avenging Horatio, which is cool and all. But does that really fit in the story? I don't really know. Is this story about Marcus or is this about DedSec and pursuing Bloom and doing all that? And it really kind of bounces back and forth. And so, as you can tell, I'm still conflicted. Did I like the story? Did I not? There were certainly a lot of points where I felt disconnected. So I would just say mixed feelings overall with this story. But a few more side notes. This game has some awesome set pieces, some really cool missions. Cyber Driver was really fun, really cool, really unique. When you go into space and hack these satellites from Bloom, what was the name? Galilei, from space and go into different locations and get into the Delaware server farm. That was a very, very cool mission. The barge mission where you're out in the San Francisco Bay was a very cool set piece. The spider tank in the bottom of that tech company, I can't remember exactly what it was a very cool set piece. Insane. Totally unexpected. And so this game does a good job of giving you some really interesting, fun, cool situations to play through. Moving on, now we're going to talk about art. And in general, the facial animations in this game were hit and miss, kind of like the story for me. Sometimes I was like, wow, Marcus and the way he talks and his mouth moving, that's really great. In other cutscenes, it wasn't great. It didn't even sync up with the voices. And I will tell you, other cutscenes with secondary characters where other things are going on. I noticed this in particular with James Sisko or Jimmy Sisko, the action star. He had some awful mouth animations, and they were drinking drinks, and the cups weren't the liquid in the cup wasn't animated. I mean, there was just small little issues that really kind of took me out of the game. And so it's a beautiful game. The lighting and the shadows are top notch. The water shaders, when you get in the water, if you ever get on a boat in Watch Dogs 2, just look at the water. It is incredible. It's exactly what it looks like in San Francisco. It's a beautiful game. The world is beautiful. The San Francisco skyline is absolutely incredible. I don't know if you guys saw on social media, there was a video of a guy who lives in the Bay Area who was running around with Marcus on his television. Then he moves his camera over on his phone to look out his window at the actual skyline of San Francisco, and it was just spot on. And so this world is beautiful from a graphical perspective. I think it deserves a lot of praise for what it was able to accomplish, the amount of space, everything that you can do and see, and the fact that it's completely open. This is a beautiful game. And what makes it beautiful is all the little small things. The car variety is top notch and believable. There are so many different cars that you would expect to run into in the Bay Area, and they're all in this game, it feels like. They're all unique. They're all their fake brands because they can't use real brands. And so that was really cool. Again, that reminded me of GTA. There are a lot of great weather effects. Love the rain. There's rain in the Bay Area every now and then, although it's pretty much the most perfect weather on planet Earth. The skybox was really impressive. The clouds, just the weather overall, the atmosphere, the day and night cycle, all of that was great. In terms of the aesthetic feel of this game overall and the art style with the UI, it's so unique. It's so impressive. It revolves around the fact that you're a hacker, but you're more of this rebel hacker with DedSec. You know, Satara's got all of her art, and that's reflected throughout the loading screens and the menus when you're upgrading each ability. Everything is so clean, unique, and again, just really impressive to me. Ubisoft seems to always knock it out of the park. They have some of the best UI designers in the business, in my opinion. This game has a great aesthetic, and it's something that I really enjoyed throughout my experience. The original Watch Dogs had a terrible map. It was dark, it was just really boring and drab, it was unique, but it wasn't exactly how I thought it should have been. I really dig what they did in Watch Dogs 2 with the Apple Maps looking system. It was very clean. Again, I think it matched the tone of the game. It was very simple, clean, whimsical, and when you compare that to the previous game, it was kind of dark and serious tone, and it was kind of boring. They really did a good job with the map system in this game. All the icons, just the way that it looks, the aesthetic feel, they just really did a good job. On the same note, pulling up your phone, which I will say I clicked up on the D-pad so many times to open up my phone. I think that's from Grand Theft Auto when you have to click options instead on PlayStation 4. That was really irritating. But I will say, once you got into the phone, the interface is very good, intuitive. It makes sense. And so you can go from your phone interface to the maps, to your missions, to route to wherever you need to go, to your research where you can upgrade Marcus, to the game options. Again, I wish I could have paused the game by other means, but the phone interface, very intuitive, very well designed. The aesthetic feel was fantastic. I really appreciated how this game handled experience and leveling up Marcus as a player. And you did that through earning followers with DedSec. You would do certain things in the story that would earn followers, which makes sense because that's, the plot. You're trying to earn followers, enough influence to take down Bloom. And they connected that with the narrative and upgrading your character. I think that's something that a lot of games take for granted. They just assume that the player is like, hey, this is a game with upgrades, so you earn experience, and it's just kind of this concept that's just assumed. No, in this game, you're earning followers for DedSec. It ties into the narrative, and that's something that I really appreciate. As I mentioned in my Dishonored 2 review, sound is something that I kind of take for granted. I don't pay too much attention to. I will say in Watch Dogs, it's not something that I noticed that much. It's pretty unremarkable. The soundtrack's all right. There's always some music playing, plenty of stations. There's just nothing super special with the sound in this game that I noticed. I will say a negative that I did notice is that there were a lot of unimportant DedSec members that had small conversations with Marcus. They had some bad voice lines. I don't know if it was the voice actors, if they got some people just come in and record in like 30 minutes or something, but they were just super uninspired, really bad, didn't even seem like they belonged in the game, and that definitely caused some disconnects for me. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I have a very small portion on multiplayer here, just a few thoughts. Again, I didn't play with PlayStation Plus, so I was only able to experience the modes without that. I did do some research, however. So I would say overall, multiplayer is fairly enjoyable. The side ops are pretty similar to what you experience in the main game, so it's just more of what you're already doing. You also have the seamless multiplayer where someone can come in and hack you. I really despise that. And the good thing is that you can turn it off, so it doesn't matter. I turned it off very early and because I didn't want to get hacked. I just didn't want to deal with that while I was trying to play through the game and experience it for myself. But if you choose to turn that on, it's very frantic. It's very interesting. And one of the modes that I researched and looked up and found that a lot of people enjoyed was Bounty Hunter, which is a really unique mode where you're pit against another hacker. They try to attract police attention, and then you have to take them out in some form or fashion. So there's a lot of different, gameplay avenues for that. And to me, overall, the multiplayer in this game, its purpose is to just increase the longevity of playing Watch Dogs, right? Of playing Watch Dogs 2, because, starting a new game with this game is probably really monotonous. Once you've done everything, then multiplayer just extends that experience indefinitely because you can keep doing these missions, keep getting hacked or hack other people. And so that's really the purpose of multiplayer for me in this game. And it's there if you like it. It's not world beating. It's not revolutionary, but it's certainly there. So this was a really long-winded review. Just to summarize my overall thoughts, I thought this game was really fun. And from a critical standpoint, I think it's hit and miss in certain areas, but so much better than the original game. It really improves on a lot of things that I hated about the original game. The protagonist, the overall aesthetic and feel of the world, the whimsical tone. Again, it's a double-edged sword in this game, but I thought it was way better than the serious and just awfully boring tone in the first game. So Watch Dogs 2 is a solid game, and I enjoyed it a lot. It's probably going to make it into my top 10 list, probably towards the bottom at the end of the year. As always, I'd love to hear what you guys thought about the game. Share your thoughts on Watch Dogs 2 in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit that like button. I would really appreciate it, and I will talk to you next time.